So you pointed out something to me, and it didn't really register. Somehow I totally missed this last night. But TTUTA has now accepted 4% wage increase, and it seems as though the government's position with regards to the labor negotiations is working out. I think you said something to that effect.
Yes, because TTUTA is not the only union to accept the 4% offer. The Defence Force, the Fire Association, Prisons Officers Association has also accepted the 4% increase from the CPO's office. And I suggested it last year. I said that if you think the government was not negotiating well, this is a situation that has been going on since last year. I said they've put an offer on the table. It was now up to TTUTA to respond, and I kept saying this is not how unions should be responding. Protest actions is not how you're going to respond to debate. Calling for a day of rest and reflection is not how you're going to respond to any sort of negotiation. And therefore, they had to probably come stronger. Now, whether or not you wanted to believe that the government was going to actually move from their position of 4% was an entirely different story. But I believe that the government's position, their stance, that was their final offer. And I think the unions have left it long enough where they've realized, listen, a 4% increase is better than a 0% increase, or a 1%, or a 2%, or a 3%. But beyond that, they've also gotten further allowances. They've actually gotten travel allowances, adjustments to traveling allowances, which will obviously mean an increase. It's not going to be a decrease.
Right.
The cost of living allowance, which is cooler, a grant of a one-time lump sum payment of $4,000 to members of the teaching service who retired compulsory, voluntarily, and with permission on the grounds of ill health for the period of October 1st to September 30th, 2016. There's also been an increase in the phone allowances for principals, vice principals, senior teachers, as well as senior special education teachers. So, generally, they have more negotiations to come up to, including with school-based assessment, Caribbean vocational qualifications. But given that this is the fourth union to actually accept the 4% offer, one could argue, listen, the government just remaining right there, remaining resilient after all the protests and after all the action of a day of rest and reflection, is worked.
Listen, I get it. People might not like the government. We question their decisions on the show on multiple situations. But at the end of the day, there's two things that stand out. One, for better or worse, they held firm with Petrotrin. So that precedent is set. It's like, look, when we say we have a bottom line, we literally have no further that we could go. We've done it before, we could do it again. And other unions before TTUTA has accepted the 4%, that's also setting a precedent. The other thing is, look at the budget supplementation and what it's for. It's mostly for, I'm not too sure if we got a full breakdown, but it's mostly to pay off bills and to pay off VAT refunds. That's outstanding.
It's for recurrent expenditure,
right?
yeah.
These are outstanding debts that the government owed money to people for. So we're not even talking about, we have a supplementation for last year's stuff. I believe the minister did mention 7 years of bills is what they're looking at. So if they're now looking in 2023 to supplement the budget to try to pay off some of these things, where would there be extra money for wage increases?
I would actually prefer, if I got a greater breakdown from the Minister of Finance, I would prefer to have an understanding. He said there's 7 years worth of debt. I'd like to know what is the value of that debt.
Yes.
What I would also like to know is the value of the loans that Trans-Tobago has taken within the last 7 years. I'd also like to know what is the value, that's the value in terms of received. What is the value of the outstanding sums of money that we have to pay towards these loans, as well as debt separated loans, as in other words, costs from the government in terms of expenditure that's overrun. And I'd like a breakdown, obviously, of the total overall. I want a figure, of the debt that Trans-Tobago is in.
That figure, the debts that he's talking about, the amount of money owed to contractors and suppliers and people who are owing who are owed their VAT refunds, I think that's key, because the hope is that the supplementation might be able to pay it all off. But if it's 7 years, the reality is it might not be. It might just be a fraction.
Remember, VAT returns at this point is going to be paid back if you're $250,000 over in terms of VAT repayments.
Well, yes.
It's going to be paid through bonds,
yeah.
right? And they're saying that when those bonds mature, the amount of money that you're actually going to be given back is more than what you actually owed. That's how a bond generally works, right? But, is the business community, I haven't heard too much in terms of whether or not they're accepting of it. I know one businessman who happens to also be an opposition senator is completely against it. I mean, he's a member of the opposition, bear that in mind. But is he speaking from the aspect of a businessman or the opposition?
There's supposed to be a facility, because I believe the minister alluded that the last time they did this, a facility was made so that you could sell the bond at a financial institution to get cash now. So the idea is, for all intents and purposes, the government, we don't have the liquidity to do this, so we will basically use the bank's liquidity. It's all, of course, dependent on if the banks are willing to buy it, which generally speaking, government bonds are safe, banks are willing to buy it. But back to the fact that, yes, it would be nice to know what the details are, because then we would know how much progress we're making. It's like my complaint this morning with the first topic on the Daily Review. Yes, we have nominal GDP, debt to GDP ratio, it's improving. But part of that is because of inflation. So the economy is not necessarily getting better. So yes, you're saying that you're paying off outstanding debts, but to what extent is the situation getting better?
Which is why it is always argued, it is always preferred that the Minister of Finance gives context and he's not nitpicky. Now, according to Karen Yosishar and other economists, the role of the Minister of Finance is also to inspire confidence. In that regard, Colin Imbert has done a decent job. I'll say why. Is there ever a time where he stood up and been negative? He has not really been negative. He's always stood up and he's always looked at things with optimism. To the extent that one might not even argue it's optimism, it's a campaign more than anything else. But beyond that, if you add context to these things, if you break down and if you analyze it, you realize, hold up, there is some truth to what is being said.
Yes.
But that is not the entire extent of the issue or the matter.
Folks, we have to break for news, but I'll say this, I can't disagree with what Ketan just said. There's some positivity with what the minister is doing, maybe.